quarrel with them, and it needs the red rage of great pain ere we tear down the places where men sleep," said Hathi doubtfully. "Are ye the only eaters of grass in the Jungle? Drive in your peoples. Let the deer and the pig and the nilgai look to it. Ye need never show a hand's breadth of hide till the fields are naked. Let in the Jungle, Hathi." "There will be no killing. My tusks were red at the sack of the fields of Bhurtpore, and I would not wake that smell again." "Nor I. I do not wish even their bones to lie on the clean earth. Let them go and find a fresh lair. They cannot stay here. I have seen and smelled the blood of the woman that gave me food, the woman whom they would have killed but for me. Only the smell of the new grass on their doorsteps can take away that smell. It burns in my mouth. Let in the Jungle, Hathi." "Ah," said Hathi, "so did the scar of the stake burn on my hide, till we watched the villages die under in the spring growth. Now I see, thy war shall be our war. We will let in the Jungle." Mowgli had hardly time to catch his breath. He was shaking all over with rage and hate before the place where the elephants had stood was empty, and Bagheera was looking at him with terror. "By the broken lock that freed me," said the Black Panther at last, "art thou the naked thing I spoke for in the Pack when all was young? Master of the Jungle, when my strength goes, speak for me, speak for Baloo, speak for us all. We are cubs before thee, snapped twigs underfoot, fawns that have lost their doe." The idea of Bagheera being a stray fawn upset Mowgli altogether, and he laughed and caught his breath, and sobbed and laughed again, till he had to jump into a pool to make himself stop. Then he swam round and round, ducking in and out of the bars of the moonlight like the frog, his namesake. By this time Hathi and his 3 sons had turned, each to one point of the compass, and were striding silently down the valleys a mile away. They went on and on for 2 days' march, that is to say, a long 60 miles, through the Jungle, and every step they took, and every wave of their trunks, was known and noted and talked over by Mang and Chil and the Monkey People and all the birds. Then they began to feed, and fed quietly for a week or so. Hathi and his sons are like Kaa, the rock python. They never hurry till they have to. At the end of that time, and none knew who had started it, a rumour went through the Jungle that there was better food and water to be found in such and such a valley. The pig, who, of course, will go to the ends of the earth for a full meal, moved first by companies, scuffling over the rocks, and the deer followed, with the small wild foxes that live on the dead and dying of the herds. And the heavy-shouldered nilgai moved parallel with the deer, and the wild buffaloes of the swamps came after the nilgai. The least little thing would have turned the scattered, straggling droves that grazed and sauntered and drank and grazed again. But whenever there was an alarm someone would rise up and soothe them. At one time it would be Ikki the porcupine, full of news of good feed just a little farther on. At another, Mang would cry cheerily and flap down a glade to show it was all empty. Or Baloo, his mouth full of roots, would shamble alongside a wavering line and half frighten, half romp it clumsily back to the proper road. Very many creatures broke back or ran away or lost interest, but very many were left to go forward. At the end of another 10 days or so, the situation was this: the deer and the pig and the nilgai were milling round and round in a circle of 8 or 10 miles radius, while the eaters of flesh skirmished round its edge. And the centre of that circle was the village, and round the village the crops were ripening, and in the crops sat men on what they call macans, platforms like pigeon perches, made of sticks at the top of 4 poles, to scare away birds and other stealers. Then the deer were coaxed no more. The eaters of flesh were close behind them, and forced them forward and inward. It was a dark night when Hathi and his 3 sons slipped down from the jungle and broke off the poles of the macans with their trunks. They fell as a snapped stalk of hemlock in bloom falls, and the man that tumbled from them heard the deep gurgling of the elephants in their ears. Then the vanguard of the bewildered armies of the deer broke down and flooded into the village grazing grounds and the ploughing fields, and the sharp-hoofed, rooting wild pig came with them, and what the deer left the pig spoiled. And from time to time an alarm of wolves would shake the herds, and they would rush to and fro desperately, treading down the young barley and cutting flat the banks of the irrigating channels. Before the dawn broke, the pressure on the outside of the circle gave way at one point. The eaters of flesh had fallen back and left an open path to the south, and drove upon drove of buck fled along it. Others, who were bolder, lay up in the thickets to finish their meal next night. But the work was practically done. When the villagers looked in the morning, they saw their crops were lost, and that meant death if they did not get away, for they lived year in and year out as near to starvation as the jungle was near to them. When the buffaloes were sent to graze, the hungry brutes found that the deer had cleared the grazing grounds, and so wandered into the jungle and drifted off with their wild mates. And when twilight fell, the 3 or 4 ponies that belonged to the village lay in their stables with their heads beaten in. Only Bagheera could have given those strokes, and only Bagheera would have thought of insolently dragging the last carcass to the open street. The villagers had no heart to make fires in the fields that night, so Hathi and his 3 sons went gleaning among what was left, and where Hathi gleans there is no need to follow. The man decided to live on their stored seed corn until the rains had fallen, and then to take work as servants till they could catch up with the lost year. But as the grain dealer was thinking of his well-filled crates of corn, and the prices he would levy at the sale of it, Hathi's sharp tusks were picking out the corner of his mud house, and smashing open the big wicker chest, leaped with cow dung where the precious stuff lay. When that last loss was discovered, it was the Brahmin's turn to speak. He had prayed to his own gods without answer. It might be, he said, that, unconsciously, the village had offended some one of the gods of the jungle, for, beyond doubt, the jungle was against them. So they sent for the headmen of the nearest tribe of wandering Gonds, little, wise and very black hunters, living in the deep jungle, whose fathers came of the oldest race in India, the aboriginal owners of the land. They made the Gond welcome with what they had, and he stood on one leg, his bow in his hand, and 2 or 3 poisoned arrows stuck through his top knot, looking half afraid and half contemptuously at the anxious villagers and their ruined fields. They wished to know whether his gods, the old gods, were angry with them, and what sacrifices should be offered. The Gond said nothing, but picked up a trail of Karela, the vine that bears the bitter wild gourd, and laced it to and fro across the temple door in the face of the staring red Hindu image. Then he pushed with his hand in the open air along the road to Kaniwara, and went back to his jungle, and watched the jungle people drifting through it. He knew that when the jungle moves, only white man can hope to turn it aside. There was no need to ask his meaning. The wild gourd would grow where they had worshipped their god, and the sooner they saved themselves, the better. But it is hard to tear a village from its moorings. They stayed on as long as any summer food was left to them, and they tried to gather nuts in the jungle. but shadows with glaring eyes watched them, and rolled before them